Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for the West Shore Photography Club meeting. It's December the 13th, 2021, and we have a competition tonight. But before we get to that, a few other noteworthy items. Is Kristen Dodson on board? Don't see. Kristen's our newest member. She just joined a couple of days ago, so I don't see that she is, but welcome, Kristen. Next week, that's the next event that we have coming up. There's no trip on Saturday, but on Monday, a week from tonight, December the 20th, I will be doing part 2 of tips for photographing in harsh light. Part 2. Okay, Joe, tell us about what else is coming up.
Okay, well, in terms of our trips, Saturday we went to the Sheepford Road Bridge, part of the relationship we have with the West Shore Historical Society, and we photographed there. And then we went to Shepherd's Barn, which is just up the road. And I think we had 24 people. I think maybe the donuts and the coffee bring folks out, but we had 24 folks, and it was a good group. So that was good. And we want to thank everybody that submitted images for Jim Shepherd. He owns the barn, so we'll be giving him a jump drive and printing him a couple prints off. I found out that when we do that, people really like that. So we have 2 more of the visits coming up with the West Shore Historical Society and us. We're going to be going to the Bayshore Farms on January the 8th. And this is a very old house, and it's the only working farm in Hampton Township. And he's going to open up the inside of the barn for us to photograph the rafters and the hay and stuff like that, as well as photographing the really beautiful house on the outside. And we have one other location which we're in discussion with, and then that'll take the 3 or 4 locations that we were going to be photographing as a group with the West Shore Historical Society. We'll be sending out in the next day or so here a listing of all of the sites that you can go to and to take images, or any images that you feel that you would like to take within the area of the West Shore Historical Society, and that'll be in the packet that you get. Didn't send it out a couple of weeks ago. We'll send it out again, because we have until February the 6th to take 2 images that you can submit, and all the details of that are going to be in the packet that you're going to get. The idea is that you would give images initially to Dennis, and he's going to make up an electronic packet for the folks that have come, so they can see the images and with a price point in it. And then you'll be delivering the physical images in late February. And then on the 4th of March, we're going to have an opening reception with drinks and cheese and crackers and stuff like that. And it's a beautiful venue at the Mechanicsburg Art Center School and Galleries. And you'll want to bring your family and friends to that so they can see your artwork as well as see all the other artwork. Throughout that month of March, we're going to have a series of 3 lectures that on a Wednesday night about various topics that are of general interest to the general population rather than just photographers. So they will be for sale in the Art Center. The good thing is they will be collecting the money for you. And so that's great. We have some other trips coming up. Strasburg Railroad, Middle Creek for the migration of the geese, snow geese. We're going to actually have 2 trips for that one during the week and one on the weekend. Harrisburg Photo Walk. Going to photograph the murals in Harrisburg. We're working on that one right now. The Lewis Hines Gallery at the Lebanon Valley College. We have our big event coming up every year, and that's the State Capitol Private Access Trip, where we go and get into lots of other spots that normally the tourists don't get into, and we have unfeathered access to photograph whatever we want. We're not going to be going to Conowingo Dam this year for eagles. The bus is not operating, And so you have to get there super early in the morning, and there's no guarantee that you can park. And if you can't park in their lot, then it's very untenable to be able to take the trip down the hill and carrying your stuff to do the photographing. Well, I do encourage you to go. If you go to Conowingo Dam's Facebook page, which I encourage you to do, you can see that quite a few folks are getting images of eagles with their talons and their fishing. It's pretty good. And also there's a video there which gives you a real good overview of what it's like there and how many people there are. And it is quite a spectacular location. So we do ask, the whole trips committee does, if you have any ideas, please send them to us. Please send them to me or to Dennis, and we'll get it to us for any ideas for trips. Every quarter we have a meeting, and we always have a lot more locations that that we can choose from. So, but we always need more and looking for new ideas. So any questions at all? Just holler out. Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Well, since tonight's a competition, let me just take 60 seconds to talk about the philosophy of an image review compared to a competition. The image reviews are set up to be an opportunity for you to get informal feedback about any image. Just even if it's an image you don't think is very good, you just submit it and you say, let's see what the reviewer has to say about it. You then have the opportunity to make improvements or changes to that image and submit it into a competition. Now, the philosophy behind the competition is that it would be your best work. Okay, not something that you just want to hear comments about, but something that you are proud of, something you've done well, you think, photographically, and you want to enter this into a competition. And as the name implies, a competition against other members or with other members in a competitive sort of way. So it should be your best work. So tonight we're fortunate to have Bryson Leidich to judge for us. And most of you have seen and heard Bryson before. He's been a professional photographer for many years. And I've asked Bryson just to take a little bit of time before we get into the images to tell you about his experience in judging previous competitions. So thanks, Bryson.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been in photography for about 52 years, and can't you tell? But, but I've been judging for local clubs and also for professional organizations in Pennsylvania and in Florida. And one year I was honored to be a judge at the PPFA National Convention in Las Vegas, which was quite an experience. When you get into national judging, the commercial work is divided from the portrait and wedding work. So there's actually two panels of judges in separate rooms. The panels are 5 judges each. And depending on how many, quote, qualified judges are available, the judges rotate because the judging takes between 3 and 5 hours. There's that many images to look at. And so about, depending on the number of people that are available, why about every half an hour to 45 minutes, they start rotating people in the panels. The interesting thing that I learned there, and something that has become part of my philosophy, is that the judging is done on a 100-point scale. And it's actually, I think, a very, very good way of doing things. I try to take that and modify it into the 10-point scale that I think is popular around here. But the advantage of the 100-point scale is that you can get a 79 as opposed to just a 7 or an 8. And in professional judging, the 8 or the 80% is where you are to get a blue ribbon. So if you get an 8 or higher, you've got a blue ribbon image, something that's really worthwhile. And then, of course, the higher the score goes up from there, the better off you are. 90s and above are rare. 100s are almost unheard of. But if you get into the low 80s, then you feel pretty good about what you've done. And then from there, they also do a pick for that special group of what you might call well, I don't know, I forget what the term is, but the idea is that there's a select group that say these are the best of the best. And that's always entertaining too. Of course, with all of that number of people to deal with and images to deal with, there is no such thing as a review. There just isn't time to do that. There are some judges who have been around for decades who hang around after the judging and are willing to look at individual pieces of work, and that's always interesting. One of the things that I found myself is that I actually prefer the review to the competition, simply because the opportunity to really kind of help somebody learn a little bit about how maybe to make their images better. Even if you have a good image, there's always something that can be improved on. And the idea of another eye, somebody else looking at your image, I think is very important. I still do that today with a number of people that I have respect for in terms of sharing my images with people and having them feedback to me and saying, what do you think about this idea? Did you see this? Did you miss that? You know, I would like it better if you did this instead of that. So, you know, don't feel like I'm jumping on you if I give you some criticism, because I get that a lot myself, and it's very, very helpful. It's how you learn. It's how you improve. And the whole idea of, gee, I never thought of that when you're talking about your images is I think, a really important thing. And I think if you're not, you know, a veteran at this, why missing the details is something that's pretty common. So don't take it as an offense, take it as a constructive criticism, which is the way I like to look at it. So anything else, Dennis, or should we go to the meat of the program?
Sounds good, Bryson. Let's move to image number 1.
All righty then, let me get the screen up here. Can you see it?
Yes.
We can see her.
Excellent. Okay, number 1, peace. I think this is pretty well done. The nighttime sky photography is very popular right now, astrophotography, I guess they call it. The idea being that you pretty much open the lens wide and then you do a time exposure, usually with a high ISO, and in order to capture enough of the light from the sky to see, you know, the stars and the way the whole thing lays out in front of you, excuse me, with the Milky Way, et cetera, et cetera. And this is pretty well done. You normally, depending on the focal length, you need to keep exposures in this in a neighborhood of 10 seconds or so, because if you get longer than that, you start getting star streaks, which is not a good idea. These are not star streaks down here at the bottom. I'm talking about actual star representations that you don't want to have streaks in. So whoever did this did a pretty good job of capture. The only issue that you have with something like that, of course, is that you're working in the dark. So you lose, you lose all of this information that you might have otherwise in the shadow areas. I did one image many years ago myself out west, and I shot the foreground as a separate image earlier when the stars were not out, but there was just enough light for me to capture some foreground information, and then marry the two together so that you could see more of the foreground and in addition to the sky photograph. And that's always a nice thing to do if you're into either compositing or into blending images for multiple exposures, and that can be kind of nice. The other thing that I should mention is that one of the ways that I look at images is I first of all get an overall impression of them, and then I start looking for things that I think either bother me or gee, I wish this had been done a little bit differently or something of that nature, in order to come up with ways to find out how to make the image better. And that's exactly what I do with my own work. I photograph it, I process it, and then I review it the next day and look at it very, very carefully, looking for those things that are not quite as good as they could be. The only thing that really grabbed me about this one is I know that, when a line in the horizon kind of goes off to the background, it doesn't necessarily end up being straight, but water should be straight. Without a reference over here as to exactly what level is, I have to assume that level is correct and that this slightly angled thing here has more to do with the receding coastline than it does with the camera not being level. But level and straight and verticals and horizontals of that thing I'll drive you crazy about that, because I spent probably 60% of my career as an architectural photographer, and I pay attention to verticals, horizontals, and perspective quite a bit. Anyway, I think this is pretty good. Dennis, do you want me to hold the numbers until the end?
No, go ahead and give us the numbers, and then we'll ask the photographer to comment on the image if it's okay with you.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine. And this is one of those things where I get into, I mentioned a little earlier about this, the 77s and 79s versus the 80s and stuff like that. So I got to go 7 or 8. So I'm going to go 7 on this. I think it's pretty well done. But it could be a little bit more impactful in order to jump that 8 barrier, if you will. So that got a 7. Okay.
Very good. Yeah. Who's the photographer? Would you unmute yourself and comment, please?
Yeah, this is Joe Farrell. That's my image that was taken up at Moss Lake in the Adirondacks. And we were photographing time lapses that weekend. And this was one of about 1,400 images that were from the sequence to put them all together. And it was very educational for me, and I learned a lot doing that. And actually, this one is a mistake. I should not have submitted it, because you can see the Milky Way is behind the tree. And when I was picking them out, I got the wrong one. And I didn't look at it after I submitted it. And the Milky Way should have been, in my opinion, in the middle of the frame rather than behind the tree. So that was my mistake. And you're right, on that particular lens, that was a 14mm Rokion lens on a full frame Nikon D850 camera. And that would yield, basically, I couldn't go any more than about 24 seconds before I started to get the stars became star trails. And I was using the 400 rule for that. And so that's my shot.
A question for you, Joe. What's causing the streaks, the white streaks in the water area?
I really don't know. I have no clue, frankly.
I would bet it's a little bit of movement in the water.
Yeah, but I don't know why it would be streaky. I don't know.
Okay.
So.
All right, number 2, seeing blue. This is a little on the unusual side of things, just mostly because the colors in the image are not quite exactly what we expect them to be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just a kind of a side comment. Very interesting from the standpoint that we are used to seeing foreground sharp and background out of focus. And in this case, we have foreground and background out of focus with a subject that's sharp. You can tell this because if you look at the colors of whatever foreground information this is, looks like brush of some sort. They're actually crossing over the bird's neck. So you can see that this is foreground and then this is background out of focus. So a good capture. I think it's pretty well done. I think it's pretty interesting, and I gave that a 7 as well.
Okay, who's the photographer?
It's mine, Mark Albano. This was shot at Wildwood, and I'd been shooting this bird and getting some very boring pictures of him. So I started walking away. And when I turned and looked back, I could see through some leaves that his head was there. So I took this shot, and when I got home, I kind of liked the abstract look of the way the leaves had that abstract look to them. And there's actually no real color correction done on the blue. That was the way it kind of came out of the camera.
Very good. This is one of those, I think, that would have ended up in the middle to upper 70s, if you will. So don't feel bad about that 7.
Thank you.
It's a good image. This one, Cleansed, I assume was shot at the little church in Mechanicsburg area there during one of your trips. And there's something about this image that really bothers me. Generally speaking, when you're talking about perspective, when you look up at something, the top tilts in, and when you look down at something, the bottom tilts in. So we're looking up at something and the top is tilting out. So I'm not exactly sure what the maker did with this to make that happen. It just looks a little bit wrong to me. And there's a little bit of a strange thing going over here in this corner. It's a distortion that also doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'm not quite sure. I'd be interested to hear exactly what was going on there. Exposure wise and overall, the composition I think is pretty good, but being an architectural guy, I would have liked to have seen straight lines on the verticals. Interiors don't usually have enough, quote, distance to them, if you will, in order to show perspective distortion in the vertical planes. In the horizontals, yes, sometimes, but in the vertical planes, they usually want to be vertical. So this got a 6.
Okay. Can we hear from the photographer?
Yes, that's my photo. I did take it into the transform tool and change the perspective on it. I sort of wanted the one window to be more vertical. So I guess I shouldn't have altered that. My main objective was to get it whiter than it was in that room. So that was the cleansed reason for the name of the photo. And I just did basic and then took it into the NIC to process it with a high key to give it a little more whiteness.
Okay, very good. Well, just a side note on perspective, normally what you want is some kind of an anchor line vertical, and that can usually be centered. It can also be one of the rules of thirds lines. It can be one of the golden rectangle anchor points, but there's going to be some vertical and then the perspective tilting in or out usually goes off of that line, so that line gives you sort of a foundation so you can believe what that perspective is supposed to be. I think you overdid it here in this. You just went a little bit too far, but it's a good capture in terms of the tonalities and in terms of capturing the light and the feel of the place. I think you did a good job.
Thank you, Bryson.
You're welcome. This is interesting. I really am a little curious as to, I want to hear what the lighting is going on in here and the overall situation. I like the shot. This is one of those times when you see something like this, what you want to do is you want to stop and you want to start taking pictures, and you want to keep taking pictures over and over and over again, and then make a decision later as to where the real value runs in the picture. You don't want to grab a shot and go, oh, cool, and walk away, because you may have been given up on something that is really worthwhile. My biggest objection here is this lady running. She's running right into the subject. I think the subject is good and the subject gets your attention. The lighting is good. The overall composition is good. These people don't bother me much at all. I wish maybe these two weren't running into each other. But I think if you'd have taken advantage of shooting instead of shooting and leaving, you may have discovered as you reviewed them that if she was back here or not here at all, and these two people were separated a little bit more, you would have had something that as a story was told with a little better clarity. I think that's probably the way to put it. I'm interested in hearing about the light and where this was taken, because it's a fascinating shot. And in spite of all those little details, it gets an 8. So
Okay, let's hear from the creator.
It's from me, Mary Eileen Carson. This is in Central Park in New York City. This particular place is called Bethesda Terrace. And I did not know the name of it when we were there and I was shooting, but it fell in disrepair. From what I understand from the article I saw later, it fell into disrepair, and only recently, like within the past year, I think, they finished cleaning it up and restoring it. So it's an underpass that leads down into off of the street down into Central Park, and it's going under the street.
wow, fascinating. Looks like a place you need to go back to.
I would like to go back to it. And I did take a lot of shots. Well, I took a number of shots, and this was the one with the least people getting in the way of the shot. So that's why I chose this one out of the rest of them, because there were people there interacting with him and talking to him and getting in the way and things like that. So I would like to go back again. Yes, it was a rather interesting situation.
Very good. Very good. Worth it.
Thank
Juice. I like this. And I think there's a hint of what I'm looking for here, but it's not a strong enough hint. The composition is very good. The color is very good. I like the way that it sits within the frame, but the border at the top and at the bottom, the bottom is a little bit of a giveaway here. The top is a little bit less obvious. I think I can find it, but if I were doing this, and I did a lot of product photography over the years, this would have been a great start. And then an added light would have put a very, very tiny little bit of either a glow or just some kind of a raising of the level of the background, so that you could see the separation and you'd see the edge. It doesn't have to be blatant. It doesn't have to scream at you. It just simply has to create that third dimension. So this has a it's not that this doesn't have a third dimensional feel, because there is a foreground, there is a flow to the back, et cetera, et cetera. But if this had just the tiniest little bit of glow or a little bit of a separation in the background here, I think it would make it just a little bit better. And that's really nitpicking, okay? Because this got a 9.
Okay, the photographer was?
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Marchetto. Thanks, Bryson. I really appreciate those comments. This is really good, good critique too. I'm kind of new to this, what I call dark light food photography, and getting a little pop to that three-dimensional background, is something I really hadn't thought about. I try to find a few atypical oranges and, kind of went after that.
Yeah, I think you did a good job overall. It just needs that little extra punch, yeah, but very, very good.
Yeah, Dave,
Are
you're
the,
developing a
I'm just
signature-
curious, Bryson, are the oranges a little bit, I guess I would say lacking highlights or contrast? I mean, are they, to you super flat compared to the rest of the scene? I'm just curious.
To a certain degree, there is a highlight here. Sometimes food photography can get to be a real pain in the neck. And you need to do things with the food that you wouldn't normally do to food. Like using oils and polishing things and doing strange stuff in order to either bring out the highlights or to suppress them, one or the other. But there's enough of a three-dimensional fall off. There's a very slight highlight here, for example, but there's a good three-dimensional fall off. And the same thing here that led me to not bother being overly critical of that. I think if you'd have put another light on it, you might have created more trouble than solving a problem. So I don't think I would have done that. It's fun to play with this stuff, though.
Yeah, Dave, how did you light it?
I had two small ring lights on this, Dennis, one from the left sort of coming down a bit and a little one on the right a little bit higher. I kind of killed the maybe the highlights on those oranges. That's why I was kind of curious. But with the glass dish, it was one of the easiest thing to balance the light on the oranges with.
Yeah, very good.
I appreciate those comments. Thank you, Bryce.
This one, memorabilia, number 6. This is pretty good, but as a product photographer, I'm going to really land on you for this one, because there are a couple of things here that I think are, despite the fact that it's pretty well done, that need a little bit of attention. One of them is the light. This is good, nice flat fill light. And that's what I would consider it. I would consider it to be fill light. I would like take this exposure down anywhere from a stop to a stop and a half, and then add another light that had direction to it that would throw some shadows and maybe some little puddles of light. If you've ever seen how the sunlight breaks through the tree leaves and leaves little pools of light here and there. In the studio, that's done with a thing called a cookie, which is slang for a cucaloris, which is a piece of cardboard with a bunch of irregular shaped holes in it. And you fire a light through that, and it makes these patterns that make it look like the tree leaves with the sunlight coming through. And that breaks up the subject matter a little bit and keeps it from being too flat, which I think this suffers from. So this is a very good start. If I were doing this picture, I would start with this, and then I would start saying, okay, what can I do to improve? What can I do to make this a little bit better? In terms of layout and design, I see a couple of little things that would bother me. The one that bothers me the most is this. Excuse me. Excuse me. By having this dead flat into the lens, you're beating the viewer up with it. You're really just kind of, punching it into their face. And I think if that were laying over on its side a little bit at an angle, laying here instead of straight at you, it would be just as important, but it wouldn't have that same look at me effect, if you will. And I think so. I would have laid that over to the side. I would have broken this little intersection here by just rotating this down just a tiny little bit to leave a space in here. Negative space is just as important as positive space when it comes to product photography. And I would do the same thing with the hat. Move it up, to get it away from the buckle, and move it a little bit to the left to get it away from the conway here. So that it really needs to sit down in here a little bit and a little bit further up like that. But a couple, 1, 2, 3 changes in position and a little bit of more interesting lighting. And I think you would have had a spectacular image. Even so, I gave it an 8.
Bryson, that's mine. I love what you just told me, because I'm thinking, yeah, I would have moved some of those myself. And what do you think of the button here with the glove? I was thinking moving the glove so that the button would show more. That bottom button. Yeah.
No, I think that's fine.
Oh, okay.
I think that's fine. I would have maybe looked at this one a little bit and just made sure maybe it, looked more like this.
Okay.
That I would have done, but this doesn't bother me at all.
What about the top button there, right by the?
Up here. Maybe if you saw a little bit more of it, or make it disappear completely, since this is coming down. There's so little of it there. I think if this came down and made it disappear, it would be fine.
Okay. A friend of mine asked me to take her retired husband's, some of his memorabilia, have it spelled wrong. I can't proof my own writing,
Oh, you just missed the A. No A.
There's an A on there. Anyway, she asked me to take some of her husband's stuff, and this is one of many. And thank you for the input. I appreciate that, especially with the badge. I didn't know what to do with the badge.
Well, whenever you're putting things like this together, there's always at least one thing that drives you nuts. So
And it was shiny.
don't let that surprise you. It's not uncommon. I'm really curious, how much time did you spend fussing with this?
A couple of hours. I mean, with different setups. Her husband was actually there when we were doing it. She wanted them as gifts for him, but he had to give us all the stuff. So we
Sure. Yeah.
And you have input from him, from her, from me, and so it was a little bit of it wasn't a struggle or anything, but you're trying to please them all. But there comes to a point where I kept moving things around and ignoring them a little bit,
As an art director once said to me, layout and design is not a team sport.
No. Thank you for your input, Bryson. I appreciate it.
Good job.
Thank you.
Off to the North 40. This is pretty good. This suffers from something which is not easily corrected. And I'm going to tell you what it is, but I can't really describe to you how to solve the problem. It's called mid-tone contrast. In other words, you've got the contrast of the overall image in terms of the blacks and the whites and everything. But when you have all of this gray and a substantial amount of mid-tone grays, you need to have a little bit of a jump in contrast, which just makes the image sing a little bit more. And there's actually 2 images in here tonight that have this issue. And sometimes it can be done easily, and sometimes it gets a little bit more complicated. But I think that the thing is that despite the overall contrast being good, the local contrast has a tendency to look a little on the flat side. And that would be my primary criticism of this. Also, you want to look and make sure that everything that's in the frame makes sense to you. And there's 2 things here that bother me. This little thing sticking up here, I probably would have eliminated that immediately. But secondly is this entire structure over here, which I am not entirely sure what it is, along with the pole. But I think I would have, if I was taking the shot and I was paying attention to the details, I would have maybe maneuvered myself around a little bit to the left, see if maybe I put her in here instead. Anything to do that would simplify the background, because this is what's important, and what's happening back here becomes a distraction, and that's what you don't want. You don't want something that pulls your eye away from your primary subject, and I feel that this does, especially since it has a little bit of contrast, a little bit of a brightness, so it does have a tendency to pull your eye away. I think compositionally, I would have cropped some off the top, which have made this a little bit more of a horizontal. And that also, I think, would have given it a little bit more impact. This got a 7.
Okay, could we hear from the photographer, please?
Yeah, it'd be me, Jim Berlinger. Appreciate the feedback. Yeah, I'm gonna go take that little stake out next, off to the right there.
Yeah.
And this was actually at Ashcombe Farms. There's a giant chicken in the field there.
Oh, is
With a sign
that?
on- with a sign on it. I took this 2 years ago, not long after I got into photography, and didn't even think of going off to the left. Today, I would have thought of moving to the left and taking the giant chicken out. So
That's how we learn. That's what we do. We'll go back and look at your old stuff. I do that all the time. What did I do before, and how can I make my images better today? So you're thinking right.
how can I unflatten my granddaughter? You mentioned it looked a little flat there.
Just a little bit. Yeah. Hey,
Well-
she's cute. What else do you want?
What can I do to unflatten her?
Well, there's a number of different techniques with filters and stuff that will add a little bit of contrast that you can put into the image, and you can either paint it in with against a mask or something else. It depends on whether you're using Photoshop or if you're trying to do it in Lightroom. So
Okay,
Bryson, would the clarity slider help with that?
it might, because the clarity slider does have a tendency to introduce some mid-tone contrast in terms of looking for edges. And that probably would have been a good way to start, you know. So yes, I would say. And also the newer texture slider has a tendency to help with that too. That might have actually done a nice job in this.
Yeah, I know you have to be careful with the clarity going too far. It's easy to overdo it.
It's very easy to overdo it. Yeah, with all of them. What you want to do is use all of them, but use them judiciously, and, you know, overdo it to see what it does, and then back it off until it starts to look reasonable, if you will. And that works. Very good.
thank you very much.
Some of us have trouble knowing what reasonable looks like.
All of us have trouble knowing what reasonable. There's no such thing as perfect. It's all, what does this look like? What does that look like? Longing to go outside. There's 2 little white patches here that get my attention, that make me wonder, you know, what is going on in terms of how the background was created versus the subject matter. You know, so those grab my attention. But again, the architectural stuff rises to the surface, and I look at this perspective here on the left and right, and I really want to straighten them out. And I just think that that's such an easy thing to do, both in Lightroom and in Photoshop or Adobe Camera Raw, that you know, not getting those edges parallel to the side of the image is something you really need to pay attention to. It seems like a minor thing, and you say, well, that doesn't really bother me. Why does it bother you? As you improve and as your images get better and you get higher and higher scores, you'll find out that the little things like that are what gets your score to be just a little bit higher than it was before. So those are the things you need to pay attention to. All
What if
right.
it's an antique frame and they're not really straight?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What if it's an old window frame
Yeah.
that maybe is not straight?
Well, if it's actually cockeyed, I mean, if it's skewed,
Yeah.
okay, then you want to show enough of the outside area that the viewer realizes that that skew is intentional or is realistic. If you get this close, there's no evidence there that this might be crooked. You just have to accept. The other thing is you're always dealing with what the photographer chooses to show and to exclude. So when you get to something like this, I say straighten it. If it is in fact crooked and you want to show that, then you have to show enough that we can be convinced that what you're saying is legitimate, if that makes any sense. Probably not, but that's all right. All right, that got a 7.
Okay. I think I know who the creator was.
Yeah, it's mine. I had to dig into my archives to find something for tonight, but I think in 30 years, I haven't met a judge yet that liked my cat photography. But, it gives me pure joy. So thank you for your comments.
Your cat is very pretty, and I like your cat. Even song. This is obviously camera motion, and so you, okay. Now let me tell you something about this kind of an image. Any image that it relies entirely on abstraction, your success rate is going to be in the low numbers. Your percentage of successes versus the number of failures is going to be quite a big difference. So don't be surprised if you shoot a lot of these and throw most of them away. It's just sort of the way things work when you're talking about abstraction. Incidentally, abstraction is the foundation and basis upon which every image is made. And somewhere along the line, if you start to think about that, it might help you in terms of composition. So, and that's an important thing. In this case, I happen to think this is done really well. I think the biggest thing that is important is the differentiation between the cool at the top and the warm at the bottom. And then the fact that there are lines that sort of end up where they should be, if you will, in terms of composition. The only disturbing one to me is actually the heavier, darker one that's too close to the center. I think that would be, if this one were not there and everything else were there, this would actually be a little bit more successful. I like this as an anchor point and this is a counterbalance over here. But as an abstraction, I think it's not too badly done at all. And I think this is something that needs to be explored. It's always worthwhile. 7. Whoops, somebody echoing.
Getting some feedback. Who's the photographer?
That's me, Elaine Shook.
Okay.
This is a scene that I frequently see out of my back door in the winter at sunset, and I probably have taken over 100 photographs like this over the years and have never gotten the look that really conveys what I felt when I actually saw it with my eyes.
Absolutely.
Because when I see it, I actually look at it with kind of blurred vision, if you will, because it's more of a feeling than it is a photograph to me when I'm looking at it. When I photograph it, what happens is that the fine details in those, the twiggy branches of the trees become an overriding theme. And all I see is the detail and it looks very messy. So this is not actually intentional camera movement. This was taking one of those messy photos and using the motion blur tool in Photoshop to get rid of that detail that was so distracting and convey what I felt was the heat rising from the forest floor and the gradient colors rising until it reaches the cooler air and the atmosphere above the trees. So that's what I was trying to accomplish. I agree with the tree in the center. Unfortunately, I have restricted view from, or a vantage point from where I take this photograph, and the tree is where it is. But I think that I will go out at, in a different spot and try to see if I can get that same look from a different angle.
Very good. Yeah, we're all stuck with nature. We're not handed excellent composition. We have to work hard to get it. Clever use of the filter in order to get the effect. Very nicely thought out. I think you did a good job of that. All right.
Thank you.
Number 10, Touch of Destiny. This is pretty well done. I like it. I like the fact that the steam, I think, was this done on a club trip, I believe. And so an opportunity to do something like this, I think, is exceptional, and taking advantage of it is a good thing. I like it. I think it's a pretty well done in terms of conversion to black and white. I would be tempted myself, even though this is well done, I would be tempted with this light in the center here to wonder if the whole image should be maybe a little bit darker and a little bit more in the moody side. And I would have probably darkened it, made add a little bit of contrast to it. But that would have been an interpretation based on my idea, not on the maker's idea. So I won't be disadvantageous in terms of the score for that. I think that's just an interpretation thought. I think it's very well done. I like it, and I gave it an 8.
Very good. Who created this image?
Hi, it's mine, Julie Bale. Yes, thank you, Bryson. This was taken at a club field trip at the East Broad Top Railroad. And yeah, I appreciate your comments. I wasn't sure about how far to go with the contrast. So I will play around with that and see, just try darkening it a bit and see how I feel. I actually, when I was doing it, felt like I was too dark. So it's good to hear you say to try maybe pushing it a little bit more.
Yeah, I would push the bottom end down a little bit and leave. Don't darken the highlights. You don't want to darken the whole thing. You want to darken from the midtones down so that this stuff starts to get in, shall we say, more moody, if that makes sense to you.
Yep, I understand.
Yeah, we all have a tendency when we shoot reality to make it look open and real, but we forget that sometimes a little bit of impact and a little bit of drama is not a bad thing. So, but good job. Good job.
Great. Thank you.
I can't wait to hear how this was done. I really can't. I have a few ideas, but I think I'm going to just keep my mouth shut until the maker tells me what was done here. I like it. I think it's interesting. I'm a little bit put off by the intensity of the blue, or cyan would be more accurate. I think I would have tamed that down a little bit. I understand the differentiation between the warm and cool, and I like that. I think up in here it's pretty good, and I like it in that respect. It gets a little more intense here. Sometimes if you use certain filters and stuff to create contrast, one of the things you need to think about is when you create contrast in an image that's in color, the colors themselves gain saturation. And if you're using a layer in Photoshop, you can put that layer in luminosity mode, in which case you can darken something and not get that gain of saturation along with the contrast. If you're working and doing it entirely in Lightroom, then you have to deal with it in a slightly different way. And I would have to experiment with that to give you any real hints. So anyway, I gave this a 7 and I can't wait to hear what was done here.
Okay, Bryson, that one's mine. This is the most unusual cloud formation I have ever seen. It was in
Yep.
Gillette, Wyoming. During our travels, Joyce and I traveled the west during the whole month of May by car.
Wow.
And I just happened to come out one evening to see what the sunset looked like. And I encountered this cloud formation that honestly went 180 degrees from left to right, completely across the sky. And even with a 16 millimeter lens, I could only get a fraction of the cloud formation. So this is actually a 12 photo composite pano.
Wow.
And the colors were intense.
Yep.
I mean, I processed it in Lightroom, of course, but they're fairly much as similar to what I saw.
Excellent. All right. Well, I had a guess and that wasn't it.
Like I say, it's the most unusual cloud formation I have ever seen.
I'll go along with you on that one. Absolutely. Very nice. Different for sure. This is an area of photography that I spent absolutely no time in. I'm not a sports person. I don't shoot sports, and I don't shoot a lot of moving subjects. I'm a tripod person, and I like things that don't move, don't smile, just sit there and wait for me to interpret them. So, but I have a couple of friends who do shoot this kind of stuff, and I see a lot of images like this, mostly soccer, not so much indoor sports, but I do like several things about the way this was done. First of all, the eye lines of the three primary subjects lead you right to the ball, which is great. And that also creates a nice, strong triangular composition, which is also very, very good. So from a compositional standpoint and just an overall capture standpoint, this is extremely well done. So my kudos on that. I think that photographing this kind of stuff, if you will, is difficult and challenging. And then coming up with something that's an exceptionally good storytelling image is also very, very difficult. So kudos to the maker, and an 8.
Okay. The photographer is? Okay, if you're online, you'll need to unmute yourself, please.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Hi, George. Yes.
Yeah. This was one of the many pictures I've taken of Dickinson volleyball. Usually what I do is I'll maybe get 500 pictures during a game. I'll narrow them down to about 40 or 50 good ones. Then I'll send them to the coach, who then sends them to the players. I really don't think this is one of my best, although, and in fact, I think it should have been for a review, because I just want to know what people think about it. But there are some reasons that I picked this. One is that I was in a big hurry because I got the memo late on Thursday and had to get something up. Okay. Secondly, I kind of like the expressions, and I think the expressions give it something of a story. You have to wonder about the girl on the floor. How did she get there? Has she hit that ball, and is it going away from her? Is it coming to her? If it's coming to her, why is she on her back on the floor? I thought it was something that might incline the viewer, if they were interested, to wonder what the heck is going on and how these people got to be in this configuration.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm not surprised at all to hear that you shoot hundreds of pictures. That's typical of what I hear, that the camera just goes at its maximum frame rate, and then you pick the good ones later. And you're usually talking about 1 in 20 or something of that nature that turn out to be decent, despite the fact that you're paying attention to shooting at the right quote, the right time, unquote, to begin with. So, I understand what you're saying. Good job. And what I was hoping is that she was going, I kicked the ball. Wow. Not ouch, I hurt. I
No,
hope
you're not
against-
allowed to kick it in volleyball.
whatever, but I just was hoping that she wasn't looking like this because she was in pain. So
I know it might be because the ball's coming at her and she doesn't know what the heck to do because she's totally out of position. Or it may have been that she hit it, or maybe one of her teammates hit it and she was startled at the at the path of the ball. I have no idea.
now,
I don't see
Okay.
much of the game when I'm taking pictures because I'm looking through the viewfinder.
yeah,
That
Well,
sounds crazy.
good catch there, George. Good catch. Snowbound. Snow in flat light is really, really hard to shoot and shoot well. And I think this one is done well. And the reason I think that is because you can differentiate the snow on the tree from the background. It happens down here. You can see the shape of the root, and you can see the snow in the crooks of the trees, and up here on the branches against the lighter background, which means that the capture in this regard is very good. I like to see highlight detail whenever possible. But when you have atmospherics like this looks very real to me. So I have no objection to it whatsoever. And of course, we all would like to see, nice rolls of shadow and texture and something like this. But when the light is dead flat, this is what you're handed. So I think the image is well done. And I think it's compositionally, it's very nice. I think the subject matter chosen and the overall look of the picture is just absolutely as good as it can be under these circumstances. And I don't mean that as a negative. I just think it's a good image overall. So good job for who did it, and it gets an 8.
Okay, if we can hear from the photographer.
Zach Bergman. Yeah, so this is Bryce Canyon. The first snowfall that they got for the season, about 5 or 6 inches. It was still coming down in the morning, and left the family in the car and explored a little bit, looking for something like this tree that I could isolate against the background, because really there, I could see the immediate foreground area, but as you can see, anything beyond the rocks that are right there was pretty hazy because the snow is still coming down at a pretty good rate.
What was the date, Zach?
That was mid-October.
Oh, okay.
Very nice capture and a good image.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what score did you give that one, Bryce? Bryson?
8.
8.
8.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And the last one, early risers. My overall thought is very nice. Presentation's good. Tonal ranges are fine. Maybe the lower quarter could have been just a little bit brighter. But the exposure can't be too far off, because it would have been very, very easy to lose this low end detail and not be able to see the piers against the water in the background at all. So in that respect, I think this was pretty well handled to begin with. The bright values are where they should be. They don't blow out. They just light things up. This is one of those things, I think people tend to shoot night shots a little bit later than they should. And I think if you're going to go out and shoot something like this, you want to start taking pictures before the lights go on and keep shooting until you just don't have enough light to shoot by. And then somewhere along the line, you'll discover that one of those frames just really nails the contrast range and the detail range that you want for your image. But I think this was done well. I think this was captured at a pretty good time, and it works. So, I'm not going to complain about that at all. As just simple conversation. I like the colors. I like the tonality. I like the basic feel of it. And I just think it's pretty well done. And this also gets an 8.
Bryson, in your experience, what is that time frame approximately, would you estimate, as to how long after sunset when you get that shot that really nails the light?
Well, I'll tell you a story about one of my experiences in order to tell you that there is no answer to that question. And
Okay.
I was out in Western Ohio photographing an industrial building, and the sun went down, and I did my usual, which I would do for Pennsylvania here, and that is to start shooting the minute the sun crosses the horizon, and you just shoot for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you probably have had it. Now, atmospherics can change that. If the clouds are right and the clouds to your west have an influence on the light, then sometimes that can last a little longer and you can end up shooting for a longer period of time. If the environmental lighting is also sufficient to light up your foreground and everything, then that will give you more time to shoot. When I was out there, the light, the further west you go and the flatter the terrain, the longer that light lasts after sunset. And I found that I packed up the car and drove around to the other end of the building and thought, holy cow, I can still shoot. There's still light out here. And I unpacked the car, and a half an hour after sunset or more, I was still shooting pictures almost up to an hour later. So there is no answer to, is there a time frame? The time frame is going to be determined by your location. It's going to be determined by the atmospherics, the clouds to your west, and a whole lot of other factors. So you just, I shoot as soon as the sun goes over the horizon, and I keep shooting until I just see on the camera that there's nothing there to be seen anymore. So that's the time frame.
Well, Bryson, that sounds like the analogy to sport shooting. Sport shooters go 20 frames per second and pick the best one. You
That's
just
about-
spread it out over a longer period of time.
I have been accused of that very thing. Yeah.
All right, let's hear from the photographer.
Yeah, hi guys, it's Ron Stefaczek. Actually, this was shot first thing in the morning. This is first light with the sun just coming up.
Ah, cool.
My idea behind this was to catch the reflection of the lights in the water,
Yeah.
and at the same time get the fishermen underneath the light in some kind of decent exposure that you can see them. So, thanks for your comments. Appreciate it.
Yep. Ron, did you take more than one shot?
Maybe 2 or 3 at this spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd have to look actually, because the ocean at that time when this is down in North Carolina, when we got down there, the ocean was really angry. So you kind of, if you 2 or 3 shots in a row, you're not getting the same shot. So I think I did have a couple of different versions of this, but I liked this one because of the reflections in the water.
Very good.
Very good. Thank you. Bryson, you have any summarizing comments?
Not really. I think we've pretty much covered the bases. I tried to say as much about each individual image as I thought was appropriate. And unless somebody has a question, I'm done.
Okay, yeah, we really appreciate it. We'll entertain the questions or comments. If you do have a question or comment, please unmute yourself and pose your comment or question.
Bryson, this is Joe Farrell. Thank you very much for doing that, particularly on my image. I really appreciated your comments. Thank you.
You're most welcome, sir.
Okay, anyone else?
Oh, great
Bryson,
job, Bryson. Always nice to have your viewpoint.
Thank you.
You're always educational, Bryson. Enjoy it.
Thank you. I try. What can I say?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bryson. Guys, if you'll unmute yourself let's give Bryson a nice big round of applause.
Yay.
Joe, anything for the good of the order?
No, I think we're good to go.
Okay, guys, thank you and good night.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thanks
Good
a
lot.
night.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Bryson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bryson.